who the members are, what your agenda is.
Mary?
Yes.
I don't.
This was right across from the big.
I got a call yesterday, so I couldn't.
And so.
Good evening, everyone. It is 7:30. Welcome to the Middleton Common Council meeting. Today is January 16th, 7:30 p.m. here at City Hall. Can we go ahead and do roll call, please?
Yes. Alder Schaefer.
Here.
Alder Wokus.
Here.
Alder Cole.
Here.
Mayor Kuhn.
Here.
Alder Nelson.
Here.
Alder Jackson.
Here.
Alder Hanairo.
Here.
Alder Crow.
Here.
Alder Lorman.
Here.
Alder Lorman is participating via Zoom.
So glad we're using technology. All right. I see that there is a public hearing. Do I need to wait to 7:31 or can I begin? Because of the agenda item.
We have to wait till 7:31 so you could move down and then come back if need be. But
Great. We could move to public comments. Is there anyone here to speak today? Because I haven't received any paperwork.
I don't have anybody that's filled out any paperwork to speak for the public comment section. I do have folks that are on the Zoom meeting. If anyone does wish to speak as part of the public comments, if you want to just please raise your hand. Okay. So we'll, two people. So now we're at 7:31. So if we can do the public hearing for the license first and then come back to public hearing just to make sure we're keeping track with the right timing. I'll get to that in one second. So just a point of information for the council, we're having a technical issue with the screen so we can show images. So if, for example, if I share my screen with a PowerPoint or something tonight, those that are participating online will be able to see that PowerPoint. However, in the room, these two TVs and your individual computers, for whatever reason, the HDMI connection is not working, so we can't broadcast that image in front of you. So that's why you received a PowerPoint or email from me with a copy of a PowerPoint that you'll see tonight for one of our presentations. So trying to fix that, but that's where we're at on that technical issue tonight.
Excellent. Going to public hearings, it is 7:32. La Casa del Marisco LLC. La Casa del Marisco is requesting a Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B intoxicating liquor license located at 2518 Allen Boulevard with Norberto Rojas, 5945 Seminole Drive, number 5, Fitchburg, Wisconsin, as agent. Is anyone here to speak? Hearing no comments, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. for La Casa del Morisco. Moving on to public comments, you may call the first person since we cannot see them.
Yep. First up, I have Jenny Corwin, and up second is Mari Farber.
My name is Jenny Corwin, and I live at 2319 Middleton Beach Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Middleton Beach Road residents. I'm here tonight to ask the council not to approve the zoning on 2159 Allen Boulevard. We understand that the current single-family residential code will not be allowed on the new proposed zoning map. So we suggest you put the proposed codes on the map with an asterisk, footnoting the site to indicate that these codes for this site will not be approved until developers' plans are submitted and stormwater requirements for those plans are known. Then and only then can the zoning codes be defined appropriately and the space and placement of the area required to meet stormwater management needs be known. We have heard your arguments from your past decisions, like it's very rare for the council to override the Plan Commission's recommendation. But at the Plan Commission meeting on December 12th, the decision was divided 4-3 to recommend the proposed zoning of the site. We encourage all council members to question whether or not to finalize the proposed zoning of this site, as they have heard the voices of constituents too. This is not a cut and dried decision, and their role is not just to rubber stamp what the Plan Commission sends them, but to thoughtfully evaluate all of the comments and input they have heard on this subject. Until managing stormwater on the site is thoroughly evaluated and we know how much land it requires and where best to develop it, the zoning can only be second-guessed. Once the zoning map is final, it becomes a legal document and will be difficult to change if needed. If these proposed zoning codes and the dividing line between them are approved without knowing what the stormwater requirements are, the chances of them being updated to reflect what they should be will be slim to none that will happen. Finalizing the zoning for the Allen site now before evaluating stormwater requirements is putting the cart before the horse. And if the zoning is found not to be appropriate, we do not trust that the council will have the desire to change it. This decision should not be rushed, as it can be devastating consequences to the lake and Dane County watershed for generations to come. We ask that you seriously consider postponing approving the zoning of this site now. Thank you.
Hey, Mari Farber, believe you had your hand up. You're still on mute, Mari.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So it's Pat Fraber, 6206 Lakeview Boulevard. I am once again asking you to reconsider the rezoning of 2159 Allen Boulevard. The citizens of Middleton have been speaking out against this for 7 or more months. There have been requests from other neighborhoods to change to a lower density zoning, and those requests have been approved. I would like to know why 2159 Allen Boulevard isn't getting the same consideration. Why are you proposing this zoning when the water table is only a few feet below the surface? Why are you proposing a building that in no way, shape, or form fits into our neighborhood? Why are you proposing another luxury apartment when the luxury apartments just down the street still have a 40% vacancy? And finally, why would you entertain this idea when homeowners who have lived in the neighborhood for 20 to 40 plus years would feel forced to sell their forever homes because of the upheaval this size development would bring to the neighborhood? Traffic, parking, if you reduce the minimum parkings, which you've talked about, which would lead to issues with mail delivery, garbage pickup, just plain deliveries, snow removal, alternate side parking, just to name a few. Please reconsider this zoning. Thank you.
Okay, and now I have a hand up for Rick Lemon. Rick, if you turn on your audio and camera and speak before the council. Mr. Lemon? You have your hand raised that you want to speak? Let's call Mr. Lemon. Can you hear me? You have your hand raised that you'd like to speak? Other than Mr. Lemon, are there any other speakers that wish to speak at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any other that have raised their hand.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to presentation from Brian Wall, the Wisconsin DNR Urban Forestry Coordinator. Thank you for coming tonight. Please come to the front.
Hopefully everyone got the email with the presentation.
Okay, here, now I've got it. Oh,
A little old school, I can kind of like stand in front of you. Do you have a chalkboard?
We have a flip chart.
hey, I just got my video, my mute to go off here. Can I speak? It'll be quick.
Yes, please do so.
And I don't have my notes, but I'll just wing this. So anyway, I'm Rick Lemon. I live at 2519 Middleton Beach Road. My wife and I have lived on Middleton Beach Road for 43 years. We're strongly opposed to the zoning proposal for 2159 Allen Boulevard. We want to thank the alders who have supported our position. Alder Wachos, Alder Jackson, Alder Lorman, and Alder Schaefer. And I'm just totally mystified why our Alder Cole, and our mayor, Emily Kuhn, are in favor of maximum development of this site, even though dozens of their constituents have spoke out against this, not only from Middleton Beach Road, but all around Middleton, the west side of Allen Boulevard, and even people that are removed from that. Yet they still are in favor of maximum development of this site to maximize the number of housing units that can be possibly put on here, much to the detriment of the neighborhood, the city, the watershed, all these things that people have brought up before. I just don't understand why our elected or appointed representatives aren't representing us. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And now back to our speaker.
Yeah, Brian, did you need to do anything?
Nope, you're good.
All right. And can you all hear me? Can you still hear me? All right. Great. Unfortunately, you can't see my PowerPoint. Do you have it up on your laptops?
Yes.
Awesome. So here's the trick. It's a little bit different because that's when I sent this morning. Of course, you never change anything throughout the day. Well, first off, thank you. Thank you, Council, Middleton City Council, and thank you, Middleton Public, for having me here today.
Well, we're excited to have you. We love trees and our urban forest, so while he's getting you ready, pretty sure that's a unified thing.
Good, because I was going to ask, who here likes trees or is tree positive?
Tree
Like I like to
positive,
say,
yes,
yeah.
yes. It's a
Excellent.
unifying thing.
And if I just might suggest to council who does have laptops, on the YouTube stream, you can see what is being shared and what's being zoomed. So if you just,
Gotcha. And it really hasn't changed that much. I did in the notes, or the one that I sent out earlier today, there were some things that were like lists of things that were on there, which I took out because I don't normally go through lists when I do a PowerPoint. But either way, so my name is Brian Wall. I'm the Urban Forestry Coordinator for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. At least I'm one of 6. And we'll get to that. I was asked to come here today to kind of explain, like, what does Wisconsin DNR Urban Forestry do? And then kind of what sort of resources or how do we play best with the city of Middleton? And I will start up by saying that urban forestry is not a regulatory department. Quite all right. I was going to set my own alarm too, because I tend to go long. I was told I had 2 hours, right? Okay, good. So we're not regulatory. That's where we are advisory consultants, and we have a grant program, and I will get to all of that as we go through here. So let me just start. First off, just throwing it out there, what is the urban forest? And really it's an ecosystem of trees, other vegetation in and around our communities that work together and provide us lots of benefits. Pretty much what I like to tell people is urban forestry really is wherever we have people, trees, and infrastructure interacting with one another. A little bit different than our traditional foresters. And you will see there's only 6 of me in the state, and we have over 400 traditional foresters. So our jobs are a little different. But if you can see this diagram here, the pie in the back, urban forests come in all different shapes and sizes, but the pie in the back kind of shows that only really 15% of our trees are in the municipality's control. So that's park trees, street trees, and natural spaces like that. The other 85% belong to the residents. And it is important to note that really we service the municipalities, government entities, nonprofits, and we work with industry. We don't really service our residents specifically or the public at an individual level as an urban forester. Again, there's only 6 of me in the state. And so we would be answering phone calls all day if that were the case. But obviously, the huge impact for urban forestry can be on the private land. So how do we as a municipality influence that? Those are some of the things to think about and that we can offer guidance on. All right, so why do we care about the urban forest? What does it provide us? And because, well, this is kind of school. What do trees do for us? What does the urban canopy do for us? I'm actually asking you. Feel free, except for those on Zoom, because I don't know how to get your hands answered.
Oxygen. I'm gonna say oxygen.
Yeah, absolutely. Trees provide us with oxygen. What else do they do?
They cool the temperature.
Ooh, yeah, they cool things for sure. Did you know that trees also have effects on our mental health, on lowering our blood pressure, on helping us recover sooner from if we were in a hospital? Our hospital stays are shorter if we have trees to look at. Things like increased birth weight. Our students perform better in school if they have trees that are nearby. So trees are very important both and economically. You guys have a great downtown area here, right? Well, trees, well-canopied downtown neighborhood areas are known to bring in people from longer distances because they want to be there to spend their money. They spend more time there, and they're willing to spend more for the same product they can get online. So those are all really awesome things. So we have economic, environmental, and social values, and we didn't even talk about like pollinators or birds. So again, the benefits are out there and they're numerous. So we don't need it. That's not what we're really going over today, but whatever. We need to know why we care for it. We need to know why the state employs me, right? Because we want to make sure one of the main things in my job is to come to councils like yours throughout my region and let folks know that, hey, you have a resource and it's an important resource that needs to be managed. It just can't handle doing its own thing, especially in our urban environments. So again, we need to manage those and take care of those if we want all of those benefits that are out there for our communities. Here's a list, and it's a short one because there's a way more for these too. There's many, many issues and threats to our urban forests. And I'm just going to talk about the top 2 because that's really where we kind of come in. That's where my role is. The lack of support and funding for communities and in forest management and the lack of technical know-how. A lot of times, communities aren't big enough or financially well off enough to have a specific forester. And they may really, it's the Department of Public Works or perhaps the Park and Rec Department that's taking care of it. And most likely that person has never had a course in forestry or trees in their entire life. So they need some help with the technical know-how. Of course, things like urbanization of our natural areas, like, expanding our footprints as communities grow, a big reason for a lot of our urban canopy in decline. One of the things I forgot to mention too about our urban forests is kind of describe our urban forest to you is we have approximately 550,000 acres of urban forest in Wisconsin. And most of our communities average about 29% forest coverage, which, it's not bad, could be better. Some are worse. So, hey, and unfortunately it is declining across our state. And a lot of people are going, "Ooh, Brian, that's because of emerald ash borer." I know that one. And actually it's not. Emerald ash borer certainly isn't great and has sped up the decline, but a lot of it comes into development. and construction and building new things, and we all know this. But a lot of people think that it's the insects when really it's us. We're the urban forest's biggest problem, and we're the biggest solution. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is it's not as diverse as we would like it to be. Can anybody guess what our most prevalently planted tree in the urban environment is? I'm not asking for a species here. I'm just going for like, you can say like oak or pine.
Locust?
Locust would be a good guess.
Maple.
Maple. Yeah, right. So in fact, with our urban forestry grants, we will not reimburse for maples because we are trying to get our forest to be more diverse. Have we learned our lesson from Dutch elm disease? Not so much. Have we learned our lessons from emerald ash borer? I hope so, right? And ash, following the old recommendations that were out there in the forestry world, ash were right about 20%. Was it a big deal to get rid of all our ash? Was it expensive to get rid of all of our ash and deal with emerald ash borer? Absolutely. Was it a budget buster for most of our communities? Yes. Maples are about double that. Yeah, so we're working on trying to diversify that. Is there anything out there that kills maples like emerald ash borer? Yeah, it's called the Asian longhorn beetle. Has it been close? Chicago? Yeah. Supposedly gone from Chicago. We haven't seen it there in probably a decade, which is awesome. However, its populations are popping up along the East Coast now. So do we need to prepare for that? Absolutely. All right, so I kind of went off in a little soapbox there. I tend to do that, so let me keep going here. Okay, so this is your urban forestry team here in Wisconsin. You'll see me way down there. Oh, yes. Can you guys see my mouse when I do that? Like, who's ever doing the live stream? That's me. These are my counties. Dane County is within that. So I've got 9 counties down here that I'm in charge of. And who do we work? So again, we've got 6 urban forestry coordinators in the state, and we do have some support staff like for the grants and for our data analysis and GIS mapping and stuff. Do these people get let in automatically? No. Yes, it's true. I can also just let them. There, I think that works. All right. So that's who we are. So we are the folks who are here. Oh, of course, now I can't advance myself. There we go. So who are these folks that we're assisting? Well, there are 690 communities in Wisconsin, which are including cities, villages, urban townships, and then there's 11 tribes out there. We are charged with servicing them all. We work with all of them. Not all of them are interested in working with us, and that's fine, or they don't feel they have the need, and maybe they don't at this time. So consistently, we work with over 300 of them, though, and that's quite a bit, again, for the number of people that we have. And we do that through a lot of partnerships. And there's this little example over here of the kind of folks that we work with, anywhere from the Village of Pound, which has about, gosh, I forget what it is. It's Village of Pound, if you're listening, I apologize, but like it's, less than 300 people, and we have places like the city of Milwaukee, which are 600,000 plus. And guess what? The needs are different, but they're also the same, So how do we assist these communities? This is a smattering of photos, so this really works better if the PowerPoint's up here for all you to see. But what we do is we do some technical assistance. So we make sure that people know how to prune trees. We do that through partnerships and training. We have our own Wisconsin Tree Management Institute, in which we take people like Department of Public Works folks or Park and Rec folks, or maybe they're the forester or public representatives who want to attend. One from each community, and we run that every couple of years, and we go through a lot of the basics on how to manage trees and how to manage the public around trees, right? Because that's a pretty important thing. The other thing we provide are some mapping tools, and because there are technical difficulties today, I won't go into my links here. Maybe my next slide probably has something on it. We look at ordinances. We advise on ordinances. Tree preservation ordinances are a really big thing right now. So if you guys are looking at changing your ordinances, preservation is a good one to work on. All right. Things like emerald ash borer and invasive species. You guys ever hear of spongy moth? Yeah, of course you have. It's been a big issue here.
They're having a presentation.
Why don't you turn it up a little bit?
All right. So these are things that we help people with, right?
Does it go higher? I'll turn the TV
Try to
down.
get up to speed on it.
I can turn it up.
Okay, thanks, Paul. All right, cool. So a couple of, then one of the other things is we provide information and data. We are involved with some studies. We used to do a lot with the UWSP. Right now, they don't have an urban forestry professors currently. But things like we survey all the communities in Wisconsin and, where's your program at? How many people, how much do you spend on trees? Things like that. So we can share that out with you guys. Are you meeting the norms of the baseline in Wisconsin? Could we be doing better? Usually the answer is yeah, we can be doing better. But we're also doing pretty good. In some cases. The other things we do for data, Dan, our data man here, for example, all the communities in Wisconsin, we know that there's that 29% average tree canopy. We also know what Middleton's is specifically. So all urban areas have their canopy coverage out there. And I was going to click on it so you can see what yours actually is. It's about 19.7%. But you also have some water and things like that too. So, you're a little bit short of the average, but with the water there and the wetlands that you have, if you add all that together, you're about 29%. The other thing too is we have Wisconsin Community Tree Map, which is all of the inventories that either we fund or that communities voluntarily give us, we have posted online. It does not include things like condition class, but it does include what they are and where they are. So Middleton's data from 2017 is in here. So you can go and click on a little dot and it can tell you what the tree is in front of your house. So that's pretty cool. But the other thing is that gives us a bunch of information statewide. So we can tell you things like maples are the most frequently planted tree. We need to diversify. Here are some suggestions that you can use that are working in other communities. So we're looking at big overall patterns. And right now we have over, just this year, we've crossed the 1 million tree mark as far as how many trees we have counted in Wisconsin. Along with that, we have the Urban Forestry Inventory Assessment, the UFIA, in which they do random sampling plots all over about 100, all over the state. And that's on a 7-year cycle, which gives us really, really, really specific data on these sample plots throughout the state to give us a complete picture of what's out there, not just the trees we're planting. All right. The other thing we do, which is probably more important to y'all, is that we have a grant program. You may know that right now Middleton has a grant with us, with me, with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for urban forestry. It was an extended grant currently, but right now I think you're working on an inventory update. And it also helped with the spongy moth last year. And if there was some money in there still, maybe this year. But either way, these are 50-50 match grants. We have regular and startup grants. Startups are for communities who are just starting out. Regulars are for folks like you. We're not really meant to be there for ongoing management or maintenance, but more for projects or novel things that we're trying out or trying to see model projects, I guess you could say. But also things like that we do support fully, which things like inventories, management plans, or tree plantings, things like that. The big one that you might want to know about here too is at the bottom, the IRA grants. Wisconsin has a chunk of money that we got from, there was a $1.5 billion package that went out to all 50 states. Not everybody got 1.5 billion, but there was that much money out there. And of the portion that we have here in Wisconsin, we are giving it out, a chunk of it out as pass-through grants, which are going to be available coming. Applications open in February of this year. Still working out all the details, public hearing to get all of our stuff in a row, but there is a map out there. The big thing is this one is no match, but it needs to service disadvantaged communities, areas where there's low canopy, and there's qualifications for that. So the question is, does Middleton have any areas? The green areas on this map, which you guys don't have if you're looking at an old copy, you do have if you're looking at a new copy. The green areas on Middleton here specifically are those disadvantaged, are labeled as having some sort of, they meet the qualification in some way or another. The other twist to that is if you are an organization, say a nonprofit, who are servicing populations that are mainly, those populations from those areas are mainly benefiting from that, then that would work too. So anyway, those are the IRA grants that are out there. So another opportunity for you. So the other thing we have are catastrophic storm grants. You guys have any issues with catastrophic storms here? Like flooding?
Yeah, never.
Caveat, our catastrophic storm grants don't cover, guess what? Flooding. Yeah, but ice storms, windstorms, things like that. Unfortunately, it's not a huge pot of money, especially with how many catastrophic storms we're seeing these days. We only have about $200,000, and those do come right out of our regular grant program. So if we have catastrophic storms, our regular grant program shrinks. But it is there. So if Dane County ever is under a declared state of emergency for wind or ice, hopefully not next week. I saw there's ice in the forecast. Ice likes to break trees. That is a possibility for you to apply for those funds. One thing that's highlighted on here is it can go to the repair, replacement, and removal of trees, and replacement's highlighted. Why is that? Because a lot of money that you can get from other sources to deal with catastrophic storms will deal with repair, and they'll deal with removal and clearing your roads and things like that. One thing they don't pay for, replacements. We do, so think about that. All right, how else do we assist communities? This comes back to the information and training. I did talk about some of these earlier, so I won't hit them again. The big one here for Middleton anyway, specifically, or the municipalities in my areas, we have networking groups. Mine's called the Scruffs. We're a bunch of Scruffs. That's right, South Central Urban Forestry. And we get together in person about once or twice a year to learn. But we also, I do mass emailers about trainings or funding or jobs or whatever else happens to be the urban forestry topic for the month. And then we do partner with the Wisconsin Arborists Association to do a huge annual forestry conference. Again, it's not just for arborists or for urban forestry, it's for tree people. You want to learn something about trees? These are places you can be. And of course, Extension we partner with all the time to do workshops as well. One other thing we do is recognition programs. Now, I'm not the Arbor Day Foundation, but I do wear their hat for our region. So if you apply for Tree City USA, I get your application. I go through it and make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. Or I encourage you to say, hey, you actually qualify probably for a growth award this year, or how can we make this work? So that's my job before I pass your award on to Arbor Day Foundation, where they make the final call and send out award stuff. Do you guys know if you're Tree City USA this year? Yeah, you weren't last year either. Yeah. However, you have been for 28 years. Just the last couple of years, we haven't had an Arbor Day event or celebration, I think was the hookup or the hiccup there, but encouraging you to do it for 2024. I'll be there. I'll be reading your application. Can't wait for it. All right. So I talked about current issues in urban forestry already. The big one right now is tree equity. So again, low canopy areas in lower income areas as well. In a lot of communities, the public trees are planted there. It's the private ones that are difficult to get, and you can understand why. Trees aren't the first thing on somebody's list if they're not being able to feed their family. So we get that, and so we are trying to come up with solutions as urban forestry as a whole to figure out some of that stuff. The IRA grants are going to help us pretty well with that, or a lot with that. We talked about all the rest of these already a little bit. One thing we didn't talk about though is creating space where trees can thrive, soil and volume and quality. And this is big for a place like Middleton. Why? Because you have downtown developments and you're also urban spreading. And the soils are not so hot. So that's one thing that we can also, we can have guidelines for that. We can do ordinances for that. We can try new things. So I'm just throwing that out there because we partner with communities. I'm doing a project with Sun Prairie right now to try new things. Resources, anything I've talked about as far as quotes or stats, et cetera, or if you want to learn more, our website's where you go. Even if you're from the public listening today, the website is there for you to use too. Okay, I know we mainly service municipal governments, industry, and nonprofits, but there's great information, including videos of yours truly planting trees and how to do it right, which a lot of people mess up, just saying. Okay, my contact info, and then the one last slide I want to share for you. So this is my pilot project. The data is still out on that, but if you can see that tree that's closest to you, it's a little bit yellow, a little bit thin, a little bit peaked. That's my control tree. The other two trees, I changed that soil that our developers left us, which was super compacted. And really all we did, because we would need something cheap, right? Something cheap and easy. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. Came in with a backhoe, right? Scooped down 24 inches. And I should say, first on top of it, we put 4 inches of compost, 4 to 6 inches of compost. Then we did the scoop, dump, scoop, dump, scoop, dump. That's all you do. And then you plant a tree. And look at how good those other two trees are doing. I'm just saying, this was in the middle of the drought this summer, or in July something or other. They're happy as a clam. That other one, so we'll see. The data's still out, but my observational data here is, I'm really excited. Other places have done this. We're just trying it in Wisconsin because we know that municipalities respond better if something's been tried in Wisconsin rather than California or Florida or whatever. We get it. All right. So that's what I have. In summary, we're here to support you technically, get you information, and in some cases, get you some funding. Any questions?
Alder Hanaro.
Thank you for that really helpful and informative presentation. I did have one question, and it's on your issues slide, issues and threats. You had native only bias as one of the threats. That seems to be a good thing to have a native only bias.
no.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because it's a big issue, right? So I have got communities, and at first blush, it sounds like this is a great thing, where I'll have a community right in there that we will only plant native trees from now on. Sounds good because natives do what for us, right? They support a lot more of our insects and things like that. However, kind of coming back to that soil issue, we don't really have native soils anymore. Trees didn't evolve on Hubbard Street, right? I mean, this isn't where they belong, really. We're bringing them into artificial environments, and a lot of our native trees just can't handle it. You'll never see a sugar maple growing out there because they don't like that at all. They need really great soil. So from my perspective, my being the DNR's perspective, yeah, plant natives where you can. Absolutely. We want to see them in your parks and other places that the soil hasn't been really messed up. We like to see at first natives, yes. And when you can't, be open to the list of trees we have out there. So again, we can diversify because we do have natives that can survive in tough spots. Silver maple for one, box elder, right? These aren't trees you're necessarily going to want along your streets. So in those cases, yeah, we don't want to, and then we don't want just silver maple and a whole bunch of box elder. We need other choices because we need that diversity in there. And that's where we then can plant some non-natives that are super tough in our urban environments. A quasi, and I'll call this one a quasi one because really, if you call Illinois native, we have the Kentucky coffee tree. Some people will debate that that's actually a native for Wisconsin. I'm open to that, could be. Great tree, super resilient to our urban pollution, our urban soils, things like that. Ginkgo, trying to go on the opposite spectrum of that. That's from Asia, right? Awesome as far as a non-native goes because there's not a single insect or disease issue with it. But coming back to, then again, it's also not supporting any insects, right? Because they can't feed off of it. But it can be a really great tool to have for our communities. So it's really just, yes, plant natives where you can, but know that we need a bigger palette to handle our built environment.
I had a question. Thank you for your presentation. And one thing that you mentioned is that there are currently no professors of urban forestry at Stevens Point, which has traditionally been the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Incubator for the whole profession. And I know that we have an opening currently, our forestry.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering what kind of experience do you have? Like, how much easier is it to work with a municipality that has a forestry staff on hand versus working and trying to educate someone like a Parks and Rec director?
Yeah, quite frankly, I don't have to work with communities that have foresters.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's how much easier it is for me because they already know all that information. They're my peer. I help them with say, hey, some trainings are coming up, or here's some stuff that you may not have caught in that one article because you're way busy answering phone calls and doing other things. But really, for the longest time, places like Madison, Milwaukee, Middleton, they didn't apply for our grants because really we were trying to get those smaller communities up and going. And they felt that, we don't need it because, we're already up and going. Now we're to a point where we can do both. But yeah, working with a community that already has a forester, my job's done. Really, just, it really is. It's so much easier.
Thank you for that. Alder, Alder Nelson? Sorry, I was thinking, I have a question too, but you go first. Can you tell me about thinning of our urban forest and what practices are? Because there's a lot of trees near my house and they're beautiful, but I can tell that they're 50 to 60 years old, if not much, much older. And it feels like some of the invasives are, in between these very tall trees, but they're also aging. And so it's one of those things where it's a very healthy ecosystem. And yet when I was up north, with my husband's family has a place up in Hayward, and every 7 to 10 years they would thin the forest when we would drive. And I would suddenly be like, oh, you can see through the forest. You can see the deer running and stuff. And he's like, that's normal. And so I was wondering, do we do those practices in urban forestry, or is that more like northern Wisconsin?
So a lot of that is traditional forestry. So it would be really difficult to apply that to, say, our street trees specifically, and most of our manicured parks. Some of our natural areas, though, yes. And it is, I'll tell you, it is this sort of gray area in forestry in general that traditional forestry doesn't cover and urban really doesn't cover either. And we are actually, that's one of the things we've been talking about and is on our list to discuss is how do we deal with those? Because communities are now like, hey, we kind of got the street tree thing going, we got the park tree thing going, but now we have Pheasant Conservancy. What do we do there? Or and we don't have really great answers for them. Yeah, thinnings are usually pretty good, but you have to control those invasives, and the invasives are going to take over if you thin something. And invasive, you can imagine too, with our limited grant dollars that we actually do have. You can apply to do those kind of things, but removing invasives or as compared to, getting an inventory and planting some trees, which one's going to rank out better? Probably not invasive removal, because that's a really just, there's other sources you can usually get money for that. But with the limited dollars we have, we can't really give you much to do anything.
It's okay. It's okay. We've talked about that as council, and I want to say our past councils have been supportive in more recent years on removing invasives. It's something that the community has asked us to do. So,
Gotcha.
But I do appreciate just sharing that insight, because I didn't know if that was just not an urban forestry thing or just not yet.
I mean, the trees obviously age,
Mhm.
and they do get old. They don't get as old typically as our forest species do. I mean, they should, because some cases they are the same, but again, it's our urban environment, and it's
tough.
It's very, very tough for them. But in some cases, if you see a tree that's starting to age out, it's a big tree, but maybe it's time for that one to go and some replacements to come in. Yet you leave some of the other old ones,
Okay.
sort of a stage removal and replacement.
Yeah.
That actually is sound traditional forestry and sound urban forestry. When we look at, and that's another with the data that we have from all those folks' inventories, we want to see an age curve, that kind of, inverse J, right? A lot of young trees behind all of our older trees. And I've seen communities that are flat, they haven't been planting trees, and their populations they're gonna decline, because all these little ones don't make it here. So it's a really good thing to do some sort of, but it's much more highly managed here. And it's certainly not like in Fitchburg, we did that at our service center, and we had a lot of complaints, even from DNR staff, when they removed all the invasive understory, because now you could see the stores across the way. It was no longer that, nice sheltered forested area, but now it's accepted. It just took a couple of years, for people to really get their heads around it, because it's a change.
Thank you for that. That's a good point. Alder Nelson?
Thank you so much. This is a great presentation. I was sort of behind the spongy moth project last year, and it was really great. But I heard somebody in a committee meeting say, well, we probably won't apply for a grant because we already got one, and it's most unlikely that we get one again. Tell me that they're wrong. Tell them to keep applying and apply for the new one. And
Always apply. Will it score well? If you have our grants are not for ongoing maintenance, more for
Understood.
model projects or pilot projects, or, high priority things like inventories, management plans, et cetera. So This would be applying for something. One of the questions on the grant application is, have you applied for a grant in the past 3 years? And how is it different from this one? I've had people who write, it's not at all. It's the exact same thing. And they've gotten funded because of the project that it happened to be. So you never not apply. It may not be it's certainly not going to be as competitive as it was the first time. But if it's just for spongy moth, yeah, but if you can throw in some other great stuff that goes with it, might be a great project.
Sounds like the IRA grant will be a good one for us to look into.
Yeah, and make sure those green areas on that map are covered.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, you bet.
It was a great discussion and great presentation. All right. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda as recommended to council by committee, commission, board, including the common council minutes of January 2nd, the audit of the bills to be paid as recommended by finance committee, La Casa del Marisco, the B fermented malt beverage and intoxicating liquor license, the annual joint funding agreement with USGS for Pheasant Branch monitoring, the agreement for TID 3 assistance for some pumps manufacturing facility, and agreements with 8 consulting firms for general engineering services, and the agreement with Elevate Energy for Energy Efficiency Navigator project in 2024. Is there a motion?
This is Nairo. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Orman, second.
Thank you so much. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to agreements, discussion and potential action on joint project proposal with Village of Wanakee and Wisconsin Policy Forum on Emergency Medical Services, EMS collaboration and shared services study.
Madam Mayor, just to give a brief overview of this item, since it was supposed to be talked about at the committee, the whole meeting that we couldn't have because of the inclement weather. Just as a brief overview, we had talked about this with the Village of Wanakee a number of years ago. The conversation kind of died down. They reached out and asked us to kind of restart that conversation about what are some opportunities for shared service and efficiencies that could be gained through collaboration with them. After talking about it with the administrator for Wanakee, we decided to at least reach out to the Wisconsin Policy Forum to see if they might be interested in helping be a neutral third party to facilitate the conversation and also provide kind of an after conversation research report kind of highlighting what are the options that are available for our communities to consider. So that's what we're bringing forward to you tonight in kind of concept form. What I would be looking for from the council, if you wanted to move forward with this, is just a general sentiment that you're in favor of the project with the understanding that there'd be about a $10,000 cost to the city. We'd pay $10,000. Wanakee would pay $10,000. And then we'd come back to you at a future date with that actual contract with Wanakee and the Wisconsin Policy Forum and the funding request for that portion. Happy to take any questions or comments that you might have on this item.
Alder Schaefer?
Yeah, just a general, I'd like to get a better understanding of what the pressure points are. Is this a service problem with too many people needing service? Is this an issue of just trying to keep costs down? Is it some of the above? Maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, it's a couple different things. It's an issue of geography. So as we're looking at how our communities kind of are growing towards each other, being more responsive to how we make long-term decisions about equipment and facilities. So if, for example, there needs to be another EMS site somewhere in between Wanakee, Westport, Middleton, do we collaboratively look at, where that facility is located? Do we jointly construct that facility? Do we jointly buy any, materials that need to go in that facility? That's just one item. Our EMS chief and the EMS chief from Wanakee mentioned that in their mind, this is really a cost avoidance type of effort. So it's not in cooperating with other communities, you don't necessarily spend less money or you don't save money necessarily, but you reduce the amount you have to spend if you work in collaboration with somebody else. So it's looking at it from a cost avoidance standpoint, because some of these investments are going to need to be made in one way, shape, or form by our communities. How can we do it in the manner that's most efficient and effective for
It's still
collective.
driven by the growth. that
Right,
needed.
in part, yep. Mhm.
All right, so you were asking if people were open to moving forward?
Yeah, so I guess my suggestion would be a motion along the lines of, recommending to staff that you're, generally supportive of the idea with the understanding that there'll be a future contract and formal authorization of the dollar amount forthcoming.
Is there a motion?
This is Jackson. I'll make a motion.
This is Crow. I'll second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the recommendation, can you help me restate that, sir?
Yeah, it'd be a recommendation to consider or to continue work on the proposal with a formal contract and budget authorization to follow.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously, and thank you with that verbiage. All right, moving on to award of bid, quote, and professional service. The first item is rejection of a bid from Ideal Builders for City Hall remodeling work.
This is Haniro. I move rejection of the bid as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Is there a second? Oh, thank you. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the rejection of the bid, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to miscellaneous. Number one, the rescinding of 2023 property taxes on parcel. Can I just read the outlet? Outlet 1 CSM 16036, Tribeca Stormwater Basin.
This is Haniro. I move approval of rescinding the 2023 property taxes. And also, give me 1 second. And also requesting to charge back the other taxing jurisdictions for their share of the rescinded taxes.
Schaefer second.
Thank you. Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of rescinding of the 2023 property taxes on the outlot of Tribeca Stormwater Basin
And charging back the other taxing jurisdictions for their share of the rescinded taxes.
thank you for your help. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to ordinances, first reading. Number one, the ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 10 zoning ordinance and official zoning map of the Middleton Municipal Code.
This is Haniro. I move approval as recommended by the Plan Commission.
This is Nelson. I'll second.
Any comments?
Yeah, I just want to go on record that I'm going to oppose this because I still don't think it's a proper zoning. I think it should be MUL at most for that district, and I was opposed from the very beginning, continued to be. At this point, this is the only way I have to put myself on the record that I'm still opposed to it. So just want to make that clear. Everything else I think is good.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Is it
Go
Alder
ahead.
Lorman or are we pointing?
I just have a question for the maker of the motion. You said as recommended by the Plan Commission?
Can you,
Oh, sorry. I think you said as recommended by the Plan Commission. Was that your intent?
Yes, this was before the Plan Commission, and well, the Plan Commission voted to recommend the zoning ordinance
Right.
to
But
the
to say
council.
as recommended by the Plan Commission means none of the changes since
Oh.
then would be in.
My apologies.
Yeah, that's why I'm just trying to clarify what your intent is.
All right, my substitute motion, well, let me ask you this, since you're up there. Would it be best to make a motion to accept all the changes from the last meeting? And then,
Yeah, that's what I would recommend that you accept all the changes, as I mentioned in the memo last time. I don't know if I said it this time, but to accept all the changes that have been made based on the guidance at the last meeting to amend the Plan Commission recommendation.
Okay. All right. So my amended motion is to approve the ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 10 zoning ordinance and official zoning map of the Middleton Municipal Code, incorporating the changes discussed at the January 2nd meeting and made by staff.
And I amend my second and I second this one.
Maybe if you could also just mention the staff, summarized in the staff memo from January 11th, maybe that would be a good way to do it.
That's summarized in the staff memo from dated January 11th, 2024.
Thank you.
Second.
Memo. Okay, I'm trying to keep up with notes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Alder Wilkes?
I was just gonna say, I don't know that we can have a substantive discussion about this without sharing some context between all of us so we know what we're talking about. If nobody else agrees and they want to move forward, that's fine, but it's hard to follow exactly what it is, that piece of it versus other pieces.
Sure.
Without some sort of shared document that we can all be looking at.
Are you talking about staff's memo or are you talking about something else?
I'm just saying, so we're all looking at the same thing at the same time. Yeah, if you could reference the.
Well, my motion certainly wasn't to preclude discussion. It was to put the item on the floor for discussion.
Right, and I'm just saying it's hard to discuss without, when we're all jumping between. It was just, if nobody else finds it frustrating, I'll muddle through.
Is
but
it the tech limitation?
Yes.
Is
it's
it
not
showing-
being able to see?
I'm
that-
just clarifying. That's
Yeah.
Okay, so it should be. I do have it shared so you can see it via the Zoom. So if you're on
Mine
the Zoom.
keeps freezing. So unfortunately, I guess maybe if I call into the Zoom, but I don't know if it, during the presentation earlier,
The Zoom for me was lagging. It didn't freeze, it just was lagging, but I would recommend we all pull up the packet, the council packet.
You know what page it starts with?
It's page 107 of the document where the memo begins,
Thank you.
107 of the packet.
of the packet. Mhm.
Could think of it as well as another platform, might be a little laggy.
what's that?
You could try YouTube as well.
That's what I was doing. That's what was freezing for me, was not the Zoom. I was on the YouTube.
Someone repeat the page number again, 107?
Page 107.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Mark, would you care to walk us through?
Just Mark, just do it.
And I do appreciate that you made all the changes that you did, Mark. I think each time you take a pass through it, it gets a little tighter and a little better.
Thank you. You'll recall at the last meeting, City Administrator Gatto put together a summary sheet, which I edited a little bit to add some references so that it was very clear what your intent was at that meeting. And I used that guidance from that meeting, which is in your packet as well, as the basis for the memo, January 11th memo. And what you see on the screen is the text highlighted in yellow reflects the changes, the revisions that were influenced by your guidance at that meeting. I also included the other changes so that everything changed from the Plan Commission discussion on December 12th is reflected in one document. That's why I kept that all together. So the ones that do not have yellow highlighting, you saw at the last meeting, like number 1, the definition of impervious surface area. Number 2, we got into some discussion last time about garage widths, and so that led to striking some language that we had added. Number 3, and that pertained to, by the way, both medium and high-density single-family districts. Number 3, detached accessory buildings on lakeshore lots. This was, I think it was Alder Haniro had asked a question that was, there was some, in an attempt to add clarity, I think I made it a little more confusing, so I struck that language. And I don't know if there's an intent to change this language further. Alder Haniro, I'll defer to you on that. But what's before you now is the red text that's underlined, that's been added. Number 4 is accessory buildings in the community market garden land use. There was a discussion last time about reverting back to 1,200 square feet as the minimum square footage, which was the original draft, and instead of 1,000. So I restored that and added clarity to what we meant by which accessory structures are that applies to that square footage. So that should be very straightforward. There was a question under number 5 regarding cultivation and adding that as a conditional use in the air zoning district. So we did that. And just to clarify the second bullet here, Alder Haniro, you had asked about why on-site consumption of plants by animals, why that wasn't part of that discussion. Well, that's because it's considered husbandry and it's in a different category. So that, in fact, it was the next line. So that's the explanation there, but I didn't highlight that because that's not language that's being changed. Under 6, vehicle standards, that's unchanged from the last discussion. And same with number 7, in-building parking versus surface parking. I know a lot of this is highly technical and gets into the weeds, but I just wanted to document what changes we had made since the Plan Commission's recommendation. Number 8, this was also recommended at the last meeting that given the Madison ordinance surviving a legal challenge, that we were asked to restore the bird safe glass design standards as a requirement, not just as a recommendation. So all the language now has been, we now use required and shall statements. Number 9 pertains to PDDs. City Attorney Fleming and I had just brought this up at the last meeting. And this sentence is now added into the ordinance. It's just a clarifying sentence. Number 10, offsite parking lot. Another change we made, clarifying that an offsite parking lot which serves as a principal land use located on a separate lot. So just adding some clarification there. So those are the text changes to the zoning ordinance that were made at the last meeting, combined with the ones that we are keeping since the Plan Commission recommendation on December 12th, I think it was. And so this is all in one spot.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'm glad you walked us through that, Mark, because if you go back to page 108 of the file, paragraph 3, the detached accessory buildings on lakeshore lots. I had asked Mark earlier today, you know, the change suggested here is to add that last sentence about the no detached accessory building may be located between the principal building and the lakeshore unless it is set back at least the minimum distance required for the principal building. And my question was, what about other views, like your backyard looks out on the conservancy and you don't want that disturbed by, you know, neighbors putting in a house? And I was thinking about when the Public Works Committee was discussing the proposed park to take the place of the boat launch, a concern was raised about a possible obstruction of the lake view by some trees that might go in. And then I wondered, why is it just detached accessory buildings and not attached ones, or someone remodeling their home and making an addition? So, you know, one of the reasons I brought up this concern at our last meeting is just because in principle, I don't like the idea of customizing sections of the code to fit a particular type of lot. And so it seemed like the lakeshore lots, that's an important view to preserve, but so is someone else's view. And so I just feel like there should be parity. So I would, Mark, you had suggested possibly striking that.
I'll take responsibility for proposing it be added, but in talking about it further with my colleagues, we are very comfortable and probably more comfortable with striking that.
Okay.
Just because of the reasons you mentioned, and Just, in other words, we'd stick with the language that's been in the ordinance for several decades and not change any of that.
Okay.
Striking the red.
The
Yep,
part that's
so-
underlined.
So I'm going to make a motion to, a first amendment to the overall motion to strike the underlined red paragraph in section 3, which is no detached accessory buildings may be located between the principal building and the lake shore unless it is set back at least the minimum distance required for the principal building.
And then are you reinstating the at minimum
No.
setback? No.
No,
No.
Okay.
sorry.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yep. Any,
So we would vote on that particular amendment.
my apologies.
That's okay.
Any comments on that amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did you like that?
That amendment.
Well,
Whatever it's covering.
that, I'm looking at it, my apologies. Motion passes unanimously. All right, was there another change you were thinking about? So you're still going through the list?
I went through the whole list pertaining to the zoning ordinance, the text changes that I've got through the whole thing. And I think that was part of the motion that's before you now is to adopt the ordinance with these changes as amended by this last vote.
Alder Wilkes?
And we're just speaking about the ordinance here, correct?
I believe so. You'd have to ask.
It's the ordinance and the
And the zoning
ordinance
map.
to repeal and recreate chapter 10 zoning ordinance and
Which
official
includes the map.
zoning map.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
includes
just,
the map. Yeah.
sorry. Throwing stuff.
So it includes the map.
Right, I do have a question pertaining strictly to the ordinance, though. And I want to say thank you for everything that you've done, Mark, because I know this has been a labor many months, and I appreciate all the work that the planning commission has done and the hours and 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 hours of review. I think as far as the ordinance goes, I guess before I say anything, I just want to say, could you speak a little bit to implementation and how this will impact an ordinary homeowner in the city of Middleton with me coming to get a permit to redo my deck or anything along those lines?
Well, first of all, if you vote for first reading tonight, then there'll be a second reading on February 6th, and it wouldn't go into effect until it's published. And my understanding is that would be the day after it's published is when it goes into effect, which would be February 16th. So as of that date, any application that we had received prior to then would still follow the old ordinance. I mean, it's clarified exactly what standards that follows, but for the average homeowner in the city, I just had a question about this today. Actually, somebody wanted to is asking about adding a second lane to their driveway. And the current ordinance requires you to have a 2-foot setback from your side lot line. The new ordinance has that same requirement. In that case, the zoning for them actually they're near the high school on Franklin Avenue. Currently, if they were to add to their 1-car garage in other words, adding to their driveway, doubling the width of it, and then if they wanted to expand their garage to have a 2-car garage, currently the ordinance would require them to be at least 8 feet from the lot line. The new ordinance would allow 5 feet. So that would actually make them able to do the project. So in some ways, the ordinance is, I would say in many ways, the ordinance is giving people more flexibility to use their property and redevelop and make additions because of some greater flexibility with setbacks. We are applying a standard of impervious surface areas instead of lot coverage, so that adds a lot more clarity to, and it's better from a understanding impacts on stormwater to use an impervious surface standard as opposed to a vague lot coverage standard. So there's benefits there in terms of predictability. We allow roof eaves, overhangs to encroach into setback areas. Right now, we measure everything to the edge of the overhang. which is basically puts us as an outlier in most communities. So we are allowing a certain amount of encroachment of certain features. So all in all, I'd say the ordinance from dimensional standards is not introducing any restrictions. Then there's the issue of use. Accessory dwelling units will be allowed as a matter of right instead of by conditional use, limited to 500 square feet attached to your house. Any single family property owner will be allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit that is, as long as it doesn't exceed the size of their house and it's a permitted use. There's certain standards that it has to adhere to, but that will be part of the ordinance. We delineate how home occupancies are treated, how short-term rentals are treated. There's all sorts of changes in that regard that add some clarity and predictability. So does that answer your question?
It does. And I think it's important, since we have sort of been looking at the minutia of a lot of the language, it's important to go I feel like it's important for the public to hear how it is going to impact them and how outside of some of the bigger issues that we've been discussing, how it's going to impact ordinary Middleton resident. How will it impact staff?
How will it impact staff? By adopting it, you free us up to do more other parts of our job. No, that's not what you meant. I think it really helps by adding a lot of clarity and less subjectivity. It actually helps us make sure that we are applying the ordinance uniformly and consistently. I'm not saying we haven't done that in the past, but there have been times where we've been relying on interpretations. Well, so we've always done it this way. And so, this is how we've applied the ordinance consistently for years and decades. So by having this written down, it helps with continuity between several of us on staff, as well as any successors we have in our positions.
The building department feels that way as well?
There are some additional requirements in terms of permits that we don't currently have on the books. So short-term rentals, for example, will have a permitting requirement. So I'm not saying that there's less work, but I think something I want to add is that our consultant, who I think has provided us with tremendous value and their experience in Wisconsin with land use law, they have already drafted for us a set of guides and application forms that we are now working on internally here to have those be in place for when the ordinance does take effect. And so we've put together frequently asked questions document to help people, and our website to help people understand the new ordinance. So all of our goal is to have all the forms very clear and following a consistent template, if you will, so that and what we'd like to do is have if you have to use multiple forms, instead of having the same information entered in multiple places, you have one spot that populates, so we're trying to have this be very user friendly. Depending on what the project is, we're trying to streamline this as much as possible, and we're currently internally reviewing those and tailoring those forms and having those in place in mid-February.
They'll be ready by the okay.
That's our, yep.
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
That you guys are working to streamline it for the customers. And Alder Wilkes, I appreciate your questions. If staff has more time to do the other things, they can look into ways to really work on the planning part. Sometimes I feel like we're really just reacting to the things coming in. Being new to Plan Commission, it just comes in and we're looking at it right in front of us instead of saying, we talk about the water impact and the traffic impact, but to say, is this the way the city is going to grow for the next, are we hitting our housing demand? Are we, is there the right portion of houses to apartments? Like having those fundamental questions, giving them time to look at it, to look at best practices across the state and having that time. And if we're gaining that by having a more streamlined zoning ordinance, I am glad that you will have time to bring new ideas to us.
And if I may add one thing, as this is implemented and in the coming weeks and months, we will track any issues that come up, if there's any glitches, if there's any, unforeseen consequence. We certainly are going to track that, and I fully expect that there'll be a need for some, hopefully just minor edits in the coming, in a few months.
And if I may speak to that, that's one of the things that really gave me pause listening through all of the planning commission discussions was when the consultant said that this was one of the most progressive zoning ordinances that he's ever worked on. And I don't know much about real estate, but I know you're not supposed to be the most anything. You're not supposed to be the biggest house in the block, the most expensive. You don't want to be the most. And so it kind of gives me pause. And I know that only time will tell if being the most progressive is something we want to be known for. I mean, if it's going to implement growth or if it's going to stall some developers, they're going to take a look at this arduous zoning. Some will look at it and be like, that's too much. I'm going to walk away. Some of it might be like, we know what their cards are. Let's go in and do business there. I don't know. But the one thing that makes me positive about the zoning ordinance is that it can be changed and that it can be tweaked. And that hopefully it continues to get reviewed, not only within the department, but also by the council, and that everybody has an ear to their constituents and to any development that happens. And so that we're able to amend it as needed.
I just wanted to thank everybody for their diligence in this big piece of, I don't know, legislation, if you will. But I want to speak to the folks who came and got engaged in public comments and took the time to share with us their emails, their concerns, their likes and dislikes. It's an important part of this process, and I thank everybody for participating in that. And I know that sometimes it seems as if you're banging your head on a wall, but you're not. We hear you. We are simply tasked with a bigger picture than sometimes it seems we are. And so I thank all the residents for listening to us as well and maybe learning more about what's going on. And then just last thing, one of the things that when I first was running, I met with Mike Davis 5 years ago or so. And he said that when he started his job, I think, was it in the 80s or when he moved here in the 80s, Middleton has been around 40% rental for that long. So it's not a new thing to have a lot of people renting here. And I want us to keep that in mind. We've been a great community for people who are needing to rent. Yes, we'd love more people to be able to buy. And that's something we're also going to be working on. So those are my comments, and I thank you.
Alder Lorman has his hand up.
Alder Lorman.
Thanks. One of the things, and this question might be to you, Brian. I've received numerous inquiries from constituents, and this is specific to the Allen Boulevard development, and it would really be more for a clarity standpoint. As starting in November, we've had several readings and votes and revisions on that property, and the biggest question that keeps coming up time and time again is, well, if this is our final reading and subsequently moving forward, then why again at this time, can't motions be brought up to simply change that zoning? And as I explained to those who talked to me about it, we've already done this as a common council, so that portion of it is done because we've done this piecemeal. But I think it would be important for clarification. The reason I bring this up is because central to this, and this is really also falling on the comments from what the other alders have said is, I'm here to really be the voice of the constituents. I have my own opinions and views and the ways I will support the city. But at times it's important that when an overwhelming number of constituents come to you as an alder, simply have to be the voice for them, even when you aren't necessarily completely aligned with where they're at. And so I think it's important for clarification that we make that clear why we have come to the point where we are. Thanks.
Alder Lorman, I can answer that question, and Brian nodding. So what you voted on as a council previously, late last year, was the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, not the zoning specifically. Frequently there were comments made about the zoning, but it was really the future land use map, which we tried to clarify at the time. What's before you tonight is not just the zoning ordinance text, but the zoning map. And the zoning map is an essential way to implement the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. So it really is a two-step approach. The other point I wanted to make, I think you referred to this as this isn't the first reading. I wasn't sure if I heard that right, but at the last meeting, it was before you, but there was no acceptance of the first reading. So this technically would still be the first reading tonight, if that helps add clarity. And the second reading would follow on February 6th.
Alder Wilkes.
Thanks for clarifying that. Again, Mark. And if I may make a substitute motion at this time, or maybe an amendment to the motion, and I suggest that we separate the ordinance from the map, if we may.
I would second that motion.
The way the ordinance is drafted, it has, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but I remember it. It basically, there's two parts. There's approving the ordinance adopts the zoning ordinance text, repeal and replace the ordinance text, and then also adopts the zoning map. So separating them out, I don't know how viable that is, but you could make amendments to the map that's in the packet. That would be a way to, I guess that's what I would recommend, but obviously Matt can weigh in on that.
We also, though, I mean, as you indicated, the map implements the comprehensive plan, and if we're going to adopt an ordinance that has a new map or anything that's affecting zoning, it has to be consistent with comprehensive plan. I mean, the other issue is I'm not sure how we adopt an entire ordinance with new categories and then not have a map that goes with it.
Right.
The two are together. Really do need to be adopted together.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Just point of information for the city attorney. Could it be the case if there was a desire by the body to split the two, that either would have to be effective on adoption of the other documents? To address your concern about it being in limbo without a map, that they would both, at some point, whether it be tonight, the 6th, or some point in the future, they would have to be adopted contingent upon each other?
Well, yeah, I mean, I as I said, I'm not sure that gets us any place, but maybe somebody feels it does. Yeah, I mean, certainly if we had a motion, for instance, that the text portion was approved effective upon adoption of the map, such that at least in terms of motions and everything, you would have that off the table. And then you'd still have to work out your issues with the map. I mean, it certainly, I think, is possible. It's just not clear to me that where that gets you, but if you feel that it would be helpful, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but one can't really go into effect without the other.
Yeah, and the reason I was, and thank you, Mark, for clarifying this, because I wanted this clarified for the public, for the constituents, so they understand that because we already voted on the map and that's now behind us, that's done. This is the next piece we're voting on. And the two are in it, they're linked, but they're separate.
Just to give the council a sense of where we're at. So we have a substitute motion and amendment, and I'll just read that back for the council so everyone knows what's on the table presently. So the motion that's been moved and seconded would be to approve an ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 10 zoning ordinance and official zoning map of the Middleton Municipal Code. In addition, accepting all changes discussed at the January 2nd, 2024 Plan Commission meeting and is summarized in the staff memo of January 11, 2024, with the amendment of striking the red line language included in item number 3 of said staff memo. And that's what's on the table presently.
Did you do your substitute motion? Because I
I
heard
did,
1
but
and 2.
We've got, yeah, I did an amendment or a substitute motion and it was first and seconded, but it sounds like it's not a.
Sorry, I didn't catch who the second was then for that.
John,
Oh, John. Okay, sorry.
sorry, Alder.
Okay, so then there's a separate second substitute motion, and you're asking to.
Separate the map from the ordinance language.
And that's what we vote on now.
Except, I think we need to know which one we vote on first.
Yeah.
Before we clarify, maybe think about that, which one we would vote on first, if you could even think about. Because
I think.
Just think about that for a second, please. Alder Haniro.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against the proposal that we separate the two. As someone who spent hours and hours and hours and hours steeped in this, I can't mentally comprehend how we would, it just is an unnecessary complication in my opinion. I appreciate, as Alder Nelson spoke so eloquently about all the comments we've received. I appreciate people taking the time to share their opinions. I also appreciate that there are people out there who have been reluctant, maybe even afraid to share their opinions. Unlike Alder Lorman, I have not heard from any of my constituents, and I say my constituents meaning District 6 residents. Only one resident that I'm aware of spoke up at the public hearing on the comprehensive plan, and those comments were very anti-apartment and anti-apartment dweller. We heard comments 2 weeks ago that were very anti-apartment and anti-apartment dweller. And I think if I'm in a situation, we all have to approach our jobs differently. Or in a way that makes us comfortable. And if I'm in a situation where a majority of my constituents are telling me to do something that I just completely disagree with, like take an anti-apartment stance, I'm not going to do it. I just won't. I would note, I respect Alder Schaefer for sharing his reasons for planning to vote against the zoning code, even though it's a good zoning code. Everyone, again, has to make their own choices. I remember being frustrated with a former colleague for voting against the entire city budget because of one project on which they didn't get their way. I wouldn't do that. I voted for the, University Avenue Corridor Plan, even though I really thought it should have been much different. But again, we all have to do things in a way that makes us comfortable. I would just note for all of my colleagues on council that the only disagreement we had on the comp plan was over the flu map. And I'm going to guess that the only disagreement we're going to have on the zoning code is the zoning map. In those maps, which are an important but really small part of the overall picture, in those maps, the only disagreement among us was one parcel. And that one parcel, the disagreement among us was, should a 3-story building be allowed there or a 5-story building? And I just don't think it is, I don't think the 2-story difference is a catastrophe for anyone. I feel bad for the folks who have spoken up and don't want their view obstructed. A lot of people who live on, no one on Middleton Beach Road will have their view of the lake obstructed. The view will be in back of them. I feel bad for the people across Allen Boulevard, which is, just out of curiosity, how many members of council drive on Allen Boulevard every day? It is a super busy, it's one of our busiest thoroughfares. So to say that a 5-story building, which again, we don't have a proposal in front of us. So anyone who commented earlier that we're, going to force a building onto that property, we have no proposal. But to put a 5-story building on a parcel of land that's just down the street from 4-story buildings, and soon we'll be talking about it later, a 7-story building, I don't see how this is going to be detrimental to the neighborhood. The Plan Commission, yes, we did approve the zoning map, 4-3, that was the vote. That is not an illegitimate vote. We have process. That's a perfectly acceptable vote. And I would note, I was chairing the meeting at the time. I asked at least twice and maybe 3 times if anybody would like to make an amendment to the zoning for the property that is now proposed to be MRL. We talked about it being conservancy, and I asked twice if anybody would like, open to a motion, and nobody made one. Then after we voted 4-3 on the designation of Avenue Mixed Use and MRL, we voted 7-0 to forward the entire package with the zoning map to the council. So I appeal to my colleagues and say, let's continue the progress we've made. Let's not further complicate this. Let's not drag it out anymore. And let's vote on this. I'm going to vote no on the proposal to separate the map from the zoning ordinance and consider them separately. And I hope my colleagues will do the same.
I just want to respond to Alderman Iro. First of all, it isn't fair to speak on behalf of the constituents, to say that my constituents don't contact me because they didn't contact you. As I stated before earlier, it is my job to voice my constituents, and that's all I did. And I made it crystal clear that there are times I do not agree with them, but I have to voice what they say. And that's all I'm doing, is passing that on to this common council. I agree with the city's master plan of development and the infill of our major corridors for housing and to support transit and workforce development. However, when constituents approach me and they object to something, it's important that they be heard. Otherwise, I am failing to do my job as an alder. That's it. And all I asked for was clarification from the city, which Mark articulated, which I wanted to be stated, so everybody understood the process, especially the public attending tonight. So I'm not here to throw a wrench in the process, and I'm not here to make this difficult for the city or the staff. I am simply doing my job by communicating constituents' views to the city. And that's our job. If they don't understand the process that we're working through in front of them, it is our job to repeat it, to articulate it, to publish it, and to make it as clear as possible. Because in the end, we don't want them coming back and saying, you never told us about this. You didn't make it clear. You weren't. But we know as a city, because we're so close to it. The Planning Commission has been out there day in, day out, presenting this to the public for the past year. But until something really lands right in front of them at their doorstep, then they get involved, and we can't punish them for that. So we step back and we articulate and we take our time. Doesn't mean we're changing things, but at least we're doing right by them. Thanks.
Alder Cole.
I don't know where to start with. I guess I'm not going to speak in, I think maybe then I fundamentally see our jobs differently. Yes, we need to hear from our constituents, but we also are stewards of the vision and planning and future of our city. I would not be in support of separating the zoning ordinance and map from consideration of each other, because they are part and parcel together. Because they are supportive and move forward the vision that we set in the amendments to our comp plan and our flu map. And I think that it's a vision for our city that meets our growth needs in smart and purposeful and progressive and sustainable ways. So I do applaud that we have a progressive looking zoning ordinance. I think that growth in Middleton is already here. It's growth that we need to be planful about to serve the needs of our city, our employers, our economic development, our current and our future residents, because we're not a sleepy suburb really anymore. We are an urban locale, and we can't ignore that we're part of a larger urban and growing region. And so I think the goals of the new zoning ordinance set out to address this, and I believe that they apply modern city and regional planning concepts and best practices for how we will regulate and guide our city growth and development needs. I think it's worth noting that as we learned during our budget discussions and as part of the city budget that this body did approve, the change in net new construction last year was at a 6-year low at 1.4%. And that really limited our property tax levy increase and our ability to move forward with city services. It effectively prevented us from approving, among other things, additional staff. And as we learned at the Economic Forum a couple months ago, we need to support opportunities to address growth and our growth needs. And we need to ensure that we have the mechanisms in place to do that. And some of that, and a lot of that is here in the vision, and allows, this new zoning ordinance would allow for that, because it is opportunities for that mixed use development. Yes, increased density and redevelopment while incentivizing sustainability. And all of those things are visions that we have had, not just with the amendments of the comp plan this year, but of years past. And so I do believe that these new ordinances align and provide those mechanisms and are based in well-researched and best practices in a more predictable and clear and process-oriented way. So I really applaud that. And do bear with me here because I really, really studied this, thought long and hard. And I want to make this next point because it's been absent from our discussions about the comprehensive plan. And I think it's important to point out, and it's a point that was made by former Plan Commission member Kurt Paulson in his written support of the zoning ordinance to the Plan Commission. And just to paraphrase him, he noted that our comprehensive plan moves our city away from what we now know to be some of the harm caused by an emphasis on single family only zoning, and that modern city planning understands that such zoning was, and I quote, deeply implicit in racial segregation, exclusion, sprawl, lack of affordable housing, and excessive reliance on private automobiles driven long distances. So I believe that our new zoning ordinances and code move forward and work to align and put into action and practice our plan to move Middleton away from those ills, and zone our city in a way that fosters social, economic, and racial equity and housing possibilities, and using zoning to lessen the negative impacts of the environment. And as I mentioned, in trying to understand and become more knowledgeable about the rationale, I'm struck by the several reasons for zoning in our city in ways that promote appropriate and more sustainable density and locations of infill and future redevelopment, and in ways that which emphasizes transit-oriented development, So when we focus on smart growth and transit-oriented development principles, particularly moving away from single-family only zoning and allowing for mixed-use density, particularly moving away from, allowing for mixed-use density, particularly in walkable neighborhoods that are a half mile from quality public transportation, like the Allen Boulevard corridor, that has the highest per capita bus ridership in the city. We will move our vision, and it will help us increase our access to transit to households of all income levels and it will reduce traffic and congestion. It improves our access to the many wonderful things about our city, like our schools and the good paying jobs that exist here in Middleton, are the fact that we don't have grocery deserts, public parks. It does lower housing costs ultimately, and helps build much needed housing stock to help us address the housing shortage and affordability crisis. And promoting density infill, transit-oriented development principles encourages health and well-being to a greater number of residents because it locates housing proximate to walkable goods and services and often like front door access to our like multimodal paths. It does work to combat urban sprawl and the adverse environmental impacts and negative health outcomes that sprawl overwhelmingly contributes to, particularly because of carbon emissions and our carbon footprints. So I think this is actually long overdue for our city. And that would be why I support the zoning ordinance and the map changes.
Thank you. Alder Schaefer.
Yeah, if I could, just a few comments. I mean, I think to me, this is getting much bigger than what the issue is here. And I think Alder and I said it, we're talking about one plot. And for all the great things we might be talking about the corridor and everything, we also have to remember, we're just talking really about one lot. And we're not going to change the city. We're not going to change the urban landscape on this one. I personally am not opposed to virtually any of the rest of this thing. But when I've never seen the turnout I've ever seen in 30 years of paying attention to this city as to that many people. And, joining Alder Lorman, that this is a huge outcry and could be partially fixed by just simply looking at one parcel. I'm not talking about getting rid of the entire Allen Boulevard corridor or anything else. I mean, if I could, I would. Maybe I can make a friendly amendment to say, can we just rezone this, not back to residential, but make it an MRL instead of the split? And I think that would make a lot of people happy. And I don't think it would cut more than about 30 or 40 units off of Allen Boulevard. And it wouldn't change the whole concept. Doing something like that would certainly get me on board with just voting for all of this and being done with it. But that's why I feel we're making maybe too big an issue on both sides about what's really, I think, a fairly small issue for us, but a big issue for that community, big issues.
Alder Nelson.
We are not voting on one property tonight. We're voting on chapter 10. This is not about one property.
Excuse me, Madam President, we've already amended certain parts of this not yet voted thing. So it would be an amendment to what's already being proposed, not what's already fixed. And
Alder Crow.
A couple comments, I guess. For Alder Call, I appreciate your comments and kind of summarizing. I think a lot of things that I've been thinking about this too, and this has been kind of I think it's been tough for all of us to kind of sort through all this. And partly for Alder Wokus, I guess maybe a question as to what your intent was in separating it. Was it to address 2159 Allen Boulevard? And could we do that as we amend? I mean, we amended the zoning ordinance. Can we amend the map rather than doing a motion to separate the two out?
I guess, sorry.
And I know that the future land use map has very specific ways that we can do that. As to what it can be zoned, if I'm correct. And maybe some guidance from staff to say, yeah, we can amend part of the map or we can't amend part of the map based on the future land use map that we already approved.
There's a resource that's also on our website called the translation guide, or I can't remember the exact term now. Maybe I'll try and pull it up quickly as we're talking, if you don't mind, or you don't want me to. Okay. So basically, we have a document that guides, that says which zoning districts are compatible with the land use categories in the future land use map. And it's on the zoning, if you just, yeah. And so the future land use map identified this area after your split vote, but it prevailed ultimately. It's just zoning. If you just do the homepage and zoning, you'll get to it. /zoning. It's a shortcut. There you go. One moment, please. And then go down a ways. A little more. Translation table. So this table here, translation table, indicates as I said, the future land use categories on the left, and then the description, and then what they enable, which zoning districts they enable. And so the avenue mixed use, which is what the majority of the soccer field parcel, if you will, 2159 Allen, future land use map is showing that as avenue mixed use. And then the eastern under 20 feet is how the legal description now reads, is shown as established neighborhood, and that enables several types of zoning categories. So that is what we used as our guide. Can a map be changed? Can the map be changed, and can you change a zoning designation? Doing so then would mean it's inconsistent with the zoning map. I mean, with the comprehensive plan. I guess I would defer to, you made the comment earlier, City Attorney Fleming.
Right, and I was just looking for that. I mean, basically, as we sit here tonight, if we wanted to make changes to the zoning map, any one of those changes would have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan future. So if for avenue mixed use, if there are 3 different zoning districts, however many, you could choose amongst those and change the zoning map as long as it was within, a zoning category that's consistent with the future land use map. If it's not consistent, then we cannot do it. The only way to do that is to change the land use map.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. So
All right, I would like to step back for a minute. Alder Schaefer, I know you mentioned that you'd never seen so many protester comments,
Percentage, yeah.
percentage, okay, in the time that you've been following this. So we had about 150 protesters from the Captain Bill site. We kept it.
It's staying correct.
It's okay. That wasn't probably your wheelhouse. We also had over 100 protesters for the 3 buildings behind the golf course in Bella Casa. Many were from golfers who were concerned about their views. It's still 8 stories. So it's not, I'm trying to say it's not here on Allen Boulevard that we're not listening. What I'm trying to say is that I think we as a council, and now me as a mayor and you all as a council, are trying to look at it as a citywide, approach. And sometimes it's not easy to hear this feedback. And there are things that I'm worried about for the people. I want to make sure people know that, there are concerns, and we do have those same concerns. But I'm going to ask Alder Cole, how many apartment renters percentage wise do you have in your district of 2,500 people?
Well, I believe, Mayor, that I learned from you from your time running that it was towards the 90% mark of the district. And I myself am someone that moved to the district and live and will probably always live in multifamily housing. And we're not bad people, and it's hard to hear that we don't want more. And if we're gonna have a footprint, if we're gonna have a building and a footprint, by allowing to go a little bit higher, we can avoid surface parking, we can have stacked parking, we can, and I understand, and I had, you know, I do want to make sure like that stormwater management is at the utmost, but I think that our ordinances and our regulations and our process do ensure that, because we're not considering a current plan, as Alder Hanairo has pointed out to us. And so by making, and I think that there's things that I would actually like to see us do even more of. I think, right, like I appreciate that, you know, Mark, you said you're keeping a list of what could be changed. And we've heard from residents and other constituents about potentially removing parking minimums so that we continue to push transit use. I mean, it is why people live in the Lakeview district, because they can get to the school very easily. They can get to transit very easily. They can get, so, I mean, I think there's opportunities for how we deal with our density in smart ways along that whole corridor. And I'm not talking about plowing down the Conservancy at all. No, this is already privately owned lot. There are other privately owned lots that I think would like to, that are aging and would potentially like to redevelop or find ways to be part of the solution. So I think it's the identity of the district also as a whole.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Alder Schaefer?
Yeah, if I just respond, I apologize for not making clear about the numbers. It was a percentage of an area. I was on the plan commission when both those other projects were on, and I will say that both of them changed. Captain Bill's cut down its height, and the building out by the golf course reduced itself into multiple buildings. So there was some changes that came from the input from the neighborhood, and there was a willingness of the plan commission to go against just allowing anything because of that. So I think that we're talking about not.
Be fair, though.
Yeah.
Captain Bill's went from 5 to 4, so that was a 1 story.
Originally asked for 7. Yeah, they did ask for 7.
All
Sorry,
right,
I'm
that's fair. I forgot about that part.
okay.
But the other one was a 1 story. I believe it was 28 stories.
Yeah.
If you were to put 28 stories in that,
14 stories.
14, my apologies.
14.
There's an FAA violation. I know there was, I doubled it. If you were to put the 14 stories on that lot, it wouldn't fly with this council.
No, I know this too.
So, you know, and in that one, when they went to 8 stories each times 3 buildings is my understanding,
Yeah.
they're actually getting, that would be 24 stories then.
Right, but they came down to
Mathematically.
3 as a way to, anyways, I don't.
So you're accurate, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure that those are listening are getting more context as
Well,
well.
I'm happy if you are to end this part of the conversation. This is
Yeah.
another question I want to ask with Mark.
My apologies.
You're talking about the usage. The fact is you've already identified, and Plan Commission has identified part of this parcel to be MRL, which means it must therefore already be an allowable use. So to me, the issue is not whether we're violating what was the strategic plan of the city, but you're just switching between 2 different codes that must already be both allowable on that parcel.
The future land use map had a division of the land similar to what's shown in the zoning map.
In that property.
Yeah.
All right, that answers that question.
Alder Lucas?
Which if we had been able to vote for the comprehensive plan again, we would have been able to discuss and work that out. But I wanted to speak a little bit to what Alder Cole was raising, because I really appreciate the fact that a lot of this is your district. You know, hits really close to home for you. I mean, right across the street. And I'm aware of the identity of your district, and I think about the identity of my district, which is very different. It's almost night and day. And I think when I hear from District 2 residents about how they feel about development within the city, and they're not anti-apartment, they want to provide home ownership possibilities for a lot of different people. And so when they see apartment buildings go up, they don't see that as people that are putting down roots here and are able to stay long-term. They think of it, rightly or wrongly, in a lot different way. And what they value in Middleton is the neighborhoods, the fact that, they have neighbors that they've grown up with. There's a real sense of roots and identity, and community identity. And when they see these apartment buildings go up, it doesn't really support that home ownership and the putting down of roots. And they don't see it as a long-term health. And maybe it's a matter of education a little bit, but at the same time, it's a perception. And I think we need to be mindful of that as we think about what the identity of Middleton is. I think that there's a real lack of it. And it was one of the reasons that I wanted to run for council, was so that we could start putting forward what that identity is. And I think I think we need to identify that and really put it forward. The people in District 2 would like to see more diversity in the housing options. They want to see duplexes and triplexes. We have places on Rooster Run and Wood Creek Lane out in Alder Lorman's district. They don't even hit the market because they're in such high demand, specifically from people moving out of single family residences, wanting to stay in Middleton, but they don't have the option to because there's nowhere to move to. Places like Bell Farms and Red Tail Ridge are developing areas like that. And I think that's the kind of development that we need to be promoting, and not just mixed use avenue type developments. And I think if we could revisit the future land use map, we obviously made a mess of that voting from the beginning. We didn't have the opportunity to vote on it as a whole council. And I think that's a real.
Maybe stay on topic, please.
Well, I do believe that it is, because the comprehensive plan, we've been talking about it all evening.
And that's a fair point.
So I would like to say that,
focus
if
on
I may
chapter 10.
finish. I think that if we would have the opportunity to revisit that and discuss that as a whole council, we might be able to move forward with the zoning ordinance and the map. But without a clear vision from the whole council on what is the identity of Middleton and the future of the city, I don't think we can move forward.
Okay, so the amendment to vote on right now, can you please repeat it?
So right now we have a substitute motion number 2, which is on the table, which would be to separate consideration of the ordinance from the zoning map.
And Madam Chair, if I may, just to clarify, a vote in favor of this substitute motion would be to separate the two. A vote against would be to reject that and continue on to the original motion, which is to approve.
Yeah, so if this motion fails, then we'd go back to substitute motion number 1, which we'd been previously talking about.
Okay, so yes is to separate, no
Yes,
is
it's to
keep
separate.
it one.
Yep.
All right, all those in favor of the substitute motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
Can you help me with the vote?
I don't have all members voting, so I'm going to ask for a division. So for those voting aye, can you please say aye and raise your hand?
Aye.
Okay. And then those voting nay, please say nay and raise your hand.
Nay.
Alder Lorman, sorry, no for you as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that motion fails 2-6.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving back to the original amended motion, is that accurate?
Yes, and I'll read back this motion. So this would be substitute motion number 1. This is to approve the ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 10 of the zoning ordinance and official zoning map of the Middleton Municipal Code, as well as accepting all changes discussed at the January 2nd, 2024 Plan Commission meeting and as summarized in the staff memo from 1/11/24, with the amendment that was previously approved, striking the added red line language under item number 3, which is page 108 of 466 of the packet for tonight's meeting.
All those in favor of chapter 10, please sit.
Just point of order, we didn't go over the changes to the zoning map. We've only discussed the proposed changes, just so that we're all on the same page.
We
Mark
did.
told me he
That
did.
was in the memo.
Yeah, it's in the memo, but we haven't, it was not discussed in minutia like we did with the ordinance language. Just wanted that to be on the record.
I believe he did because he noted that the only changes that the city-owned parcels that comprise the airport are now shown in the air zoning district.
I don't think that was mentioned out loud tonight yet.
I went through the zoning text, not through the map, I think is her point.
Yes,
So,
thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Are you asking me to? Okay. So thank you for the reminder that we hadn't gone through that, Alder Wilkes. For the zoning map, the only change from what you saw previously is the application of the air zoning district to the airport properties. And that's in addition to the other changes that have been made since the public hearing. So the other changes are listed on page 5 of my memo, and I broke them down by aldermanic district just for locational reasons and to help the council members understand where the changes were. But the other changes listed aside from the air were all endorsed by the Plan Commission at the December 12th meeting. So that's the Lycon parcels and University Avenue Highway 14 are being proposed for industrial medium. The parcels along the west side of North High Point Road, north of Greenway, so between the Beltline and High Point Road, would become mixed-use neighborhood. The parcels on the south side of Terrace, west of Parmenter, would retain their R2 zoning equivalent, which is TRF, which is two-family flat, the two-flat format. And then in Alder District 5, the airport, which we've talked about previously, that's a planned development district. And because the city owns all that property, the city can consent to the rezoning. Aldermanic District 6, the 3 parcels that Alder Hanairo requested be changed to conservancy. And that's consistent with the future land use map, I would add. Aldermanic District 7, we had a property owner pointed out that there are several parcels less than 5,000 square feet, which wouldn't meet the single family medium density. So those are now being single family high density. That was an oversight on our part. So those are the changes that were made after the public hearing.
Okay, any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the chapter 10, apologize. Yes,
Maybe we have Brian repeat it.
thank you.
And note that it is the first reading.
Yes.
Yes, so this would be a motion to approve first reading of ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 10 zoning ordinance in official zoning map of the Middleton Municipal Code and accept all changes discussed at the January 2nd, 2024 Plan Commission meeting and as summarized in the staff memo from January 11, 2024, with the amendment striking the added red line language in item number 3, which is page 108 of 466 of the packet for today.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
No.
No.
I have 6 in favor and 2 opposed, so that motion passes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance to repeal and recreate chapter 22 signs of the Middleton Municipal Code.
So I move that we approve first reading of the ordinance to repeal and recreate chapter 22 signs of the Middleton Municipal Code.
Is there a second?
This is Jackson. I'll second it.
Any comments?
Did this also reflect the changes that were adopted? The changes you were going to make to the amendment?
May I recommend that, Alderman Hyrule, that you say as recommended by the Plan Commission with the change identified in the staff memo?
Okay,
Is that all
Alder
right?
Jackson,
Sorry.
here comes my substitute.
I'm not trying to put
I
words in your
move
mouth.
that we approve the ordinance to repeal and recreate chapter 22 signs of the Middleton Municipal Code. Help me out here, Mark, as
recommended by the Plan Commission
I feel like I'm getting married, as recommended by the Plan Commission
with the change identified in the January 11th staff memo.
with
if
the
that's what your
changes
intent is.
identified in the January 11th staff memo.
Yeah.
And do you concur, Alder Jackson,
Aye, I agree.
with the changes? Thank you. Any comments? Alder Cole?
Yeah, I appreciate the work with the language changes to the feather signs. I think that aligning it and making it consistent with the other banner sign was, I think it solves our issue that we brought up last time.
Do you want to?
I just wanted to put up a hypothetical on that feather signs. So if there's an event at Stonehorse Green and we have 6 feather signs for 4 hours,
The way the ordinance reads is, I don't remember now what the zone, I think that's mixed use.
recommended that only one.
As long as you would have multiple vendors or, like, so for the art
Yeah,
walk, for
organization.
example, if it's all on one lot, as long as there are like 4 or 5 people selling their wares or musicians or whatever, you could have multiple signs.
We could have multiple.
I was trying to remember if the zoning, now I can't remember if the zoning of that parcel, so I guess that's mixed use downtown as opposed to, yeah, I think that's what we zoned it. So, yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
Go.
Yeah.
All right.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to number 3, ordinance to repeal and recreate chapter 3 outdoor lighting of the Middleton Municipal Code. Is there a motion?
It's chapter 33. I'm gonna let someone else take this one.
Chapter 33? Sorry.
That's what it says in my thing.
Did I miss?
No, I think I'm tired. I think I need
Oh.
more coffee. I apologize.
Is it 33, Mark?
Yes, I hope I didn't type 35,
no,
which is,
it's-
okay, it was
That was
30,
me.
okay.
My
All right,
apologies.
Okay. That's only 5 more than 28 though.
Well, since Lisa doesn't want to do it, I will move that we approve the amending and recreating of chapter 33 with the changes that were made at the
January
January
2nd.
2nd meeting.
And
In the
addressed
January
in the
11th.
January 11th.
And the changes that were added by the January 11th staff memo.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any comments? Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that, we're gonna make everybody go back and change all their lighting if they don't meet code. Is that up to? Does that just happen when they want to change something, or is that, are the lighting pops coming?
When,
I'm looking at Jim Solinger behind you.
so this, the way it's written is that the
I'm on
one,
page 113.
well, yeah, I'm looking at my memo, but there's this, I think the same language is there. So new uses, buildings, major additions and modifications. That's, if there's non-conforming lighting and they're seeking a new use, building or major modification, then all new outdoor lighting shall be reviewed and brought to compliance with code.
So it's on modification.
Right, and any existing outdoor, well, then the rest of it is spelled out here too.
If they don't do anything, then they
Right.
have to change.
Great. All those any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to planning and zoning, number 1, modifying conditions of approval, GIT Middleton Shores redevelopment, 6140 Century Avenue.
This is Nairo. I'd like to make 2 motions, and I had shared them with Brian earlier, but I don't know if everybody can see them. So I will read them. I move that the Common Council remove the first contingency of our GIP approval of the Middleton Shores redevelopment at 6140 Century Avenue that we made back in June 2023. And here's the first contingency that I'm proposing we remove. Applicant will support city assigning the multifamily high-density zoning classification or its equivalent at the time the city adopts its new zoning map. That is my motion. If someone will second it, we can discuss and Mark can explain.
This is Jackson. I'll second it.
Mark, would you like to explain?
Sure. So when we were drafting the zoning ordinance, at that point in time, we thought that we would have a multifamily high density category that would allow a 7-story building by conditional use. That was subsequently changed based on guidance from our city attorney. And the maximum allowed height is 5 stories in that zoning district. And we were originally going to allow up to 2 additional stories by conditional use. But for reasons that we discussed at Plan Commission, the incentive approach for allowing the extra stories with the land use restriction agreement and or net zero design standards are no longer linked to the conditional use process. So we got rid of the conditional use process for those incentives. And so as a result, we were faced with, if this SIP is approved, then you'd be approving an SIP that isn't consistent with the zoning that's about to be assigned. So that's why we suggested removing this condition of approval and keeping it the property's own PDD, if that makes sense.
Any comments?
So I guess I'm not quite clear on how the motion.
So the motion she's making is what we recommended at the staff level and what the Plan Commission endorsed as well, which is simply to strike. We originally were trying to encourage this property owner as well as others to accept as a condition of approval that they would and not take on PDD zoning, but take on one of the new zoning classifications. This zoning classification no longer fits.
Right. And we, if I may, when the Plan Commission forwarded this to council and council approved the second reading on June 20th, there were 10 contingencies. And the first one, and I think we've been doing this with all the proposals that come our way, is that they'll, agree to allow us to change or not change the zoning, but instead of having it be PDD, go with the new zoning code. So I'm just moving to strike that first of 10 contingencies, which I don't think you mentioned we would need to follow up on with the formal ordinance approving that change, because they do have.
That's correct. Yeah, if your motion is approved, that'll effectively be direction for me to go back and draft the correct ordinance to actually put that into effect.
Okay.
As part of chapter 10?
No, it's to actually amend
The PDD for
the
this.
PDD, yeah, because effectively those contingencies are really incorporated into the PDD, so you need an act of similar stature, which if you do something by ordinance, you change it by ordinance, but this is, effectively to give me direction to prepare that ordinance to put that into effect.
And if you didn't approve this tonight, it would create a conundrum for the Plan Commission at their next meeting, if they're being asked to approve an SIP that can't meet the standards of the new ordinance. That's why we're trying to avoid that problem.
Alder Wilkes?
So just so I'm clear, this becomes a PDD then? rather than.
Right, which is
okay,
our standard.
Which
right.
is the current standard that we're.
And it's currently zoned PDD, but
Right.
it will remain a PDD.
But the
is-
contingency was that it was going to change
For-
to whatever
with
the new zoning was
map.
because, okay.
Right.
Then now you're gonna call it a PUD or something, right?
Right.
Be a yeah, a PUD.
So the PDD will still allow for the 7 stories.
Yeah.
And actually, now that I think about it, we'll look at the zoning map that was just before you. I can't remember if Daphne has changed that back to, the point is we'll fix that for the second reading too, based on your action tonight, if that needs to be fixed.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Of the motion to remove the first contingency of our GIP approval of the Middleton Shores redevelopment at 6140 Century Avenue from June 2023 to take out applicant will support city assigning the multifamily high-density zoning classification or its equivalent at the time the city adopts its new zoning map.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1.
My second motion is I move that the council amend the second contingency of our GIP approval of Middleton Shores redevelopment at 6140 Century Avenue made in June 2023. Specifically, now I really wish we could all see. I'm going to just read the entire thing and I will let you know when I'm adding language. City approval of a certified survey map, CSM, for the entire area covered by the GIP, with the CSM indicating dedication of land or easements necessary to accommodate, and here I'm adding this phrase, shared stormwater management facilities across all future parcels and, going back to the original language, which is still in here, public pedestrian walkways or shared use trails along the east side of Allen Court and the west side of Marina Drive. This is a new sentence I would like to add. The certified survey map may be completed as a condition of SIP approval prior to issuance of any zoning and building permits, including early start permits. That is my motion. And again, if there's a second, we can have Mark explain.
If I may help,
Lucas?
it's on page 459 of the packet.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any comments? Mark, can you?
Sure. So the Planning Commission also adopted this language. It was just in a slightly different format. And what Alder Haniro is doing is adding this to the, modifying the original condition of approval, which is entirely appropriate.
Thank you
So
for that.
this is consistent with Planning Commission.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the changed,
Have the motion to amend the second contingency of our GI approval of Middleton Shores redevelopment, 6140 Century Avenue, approved in June 2023, to add shared stormwater management facilities across all future parcels, and also to clarify that the certified survey map may be completed as a condition of SIP approval prior to issuance of any zoning and building permits, including early start permits.
please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to resolutions, Resolution 2024-02 in support of the 2023 Assembly Bill 61.
This is Alder Crow. I would make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-02 in support of 2023 Assembly Bill 61.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Sanira.
Any comments? Hearing,
I just had a question.
Sure.
And did you have a comment?
No, go ahead.
Okay. It was just, do we want to direct any kind of distribution of the resolution, or do we have a standard thing that we do?
To answer the question, standardly, we would send it to at least our 3 local representatives, so state senator and our 2 representatives that cover the vast majority of the community. We can add anybody else that you'd like to send this to.
Okay, as long as I know it's going to them, that's good.
Would it,
Press as well.
would it also go to the Municipalities Association for their government affairs folks? Yeah, okay.
any other comments?
I fully support the idea of this. Maybe I'm being a dummy, but I don't want people to just neglect their walks at the same time. Help me understand what the responsibility will still be.
Can I, but this has come up in water resource management and there's an assembly bill, hasn't been voted on yet, but is a way of reducing the amount of salt that people use for, I mean, geared toward, well, I guess it's geared toward anybody, but especially businesses, that there's people have liability if people slip and fall or have an accident on a parking lot or whatever. This bill would reduce the liability that businesses would face if those businesses use someone who's actually certified with applying the right amount of salt. It doesn't eliminate the salt, but it's encouraging them to use correct amounts.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alder Crow. Any other comments? And great question, by the way, because we want to make sure that people are not
Well,
falling.
I am that business who has to worry about that.
Right.
so.
Very good. Very good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next up is discussion. Number 1, updates on committees, commissions, and board. Any updates from folks? All right, well, we heard from Water Resources and the exciting things with saving the planet every step by step. So thanks for that. Looks like that's it. So we can move on to convening into closed session. Number 1 is convene into closed session pursuant to section 19.85 Wisconsin statutes 19.85 for conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. The commission will discuss litigation and potential settlement of matters concerning 1, Adams Outdoor Signs versus City of Middleton et al., and 2, Office of the Commissioner of Railroads decision regarding the Aurora Street Crossing, Public Service Commission docket 9170RX402, and 3, runway protection zones. Can we go to a roll call, please?
Yep, before I need someone to,
Need a
and then
motion.
second that motion.
Oh, thank you. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Sure, this is Nairo. I move that we go into closed session.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Nelson. Any comments? Hearing none?
Okay, and before I call the roll call vote, just for clarification for the minutes, it's 19.851G is the state statute citation for this closed session. Alder Schaefer,
Yes.
Alder Wokus,
Yes.
Alder Cole,
Yes.
Alder Nelson, Alder Jackson,
Yes.
Alder Lorman,
Yes.
Alder Hanairo,
Yes.
Alder Crow,
Yes.
Mayor Kuhn.
Yes.
Okay, we will be going in closed session. Give me a couple minutes to get things ready.